how to defend a federal fraud case. First, federal fraud covers a lot of ground. It can involve a lot of different schemes, a lot of different accusations. However, in my experience, the majority of federal fraud involves misrepresentations or lies, and often misrepresentation or lies to obtain something of value, usually money, through those false statements or those lies. And critical to those false statements and those misrepresentations is a scheme to defraud. This comes up in healthcare fraud, this comes up in wire fraud, it comes up in mail fraud. So schemes to defraud that involve false statements and an intent to defraud. And often a key defense and a common defense in a federal fraud case is looking at that intent to defraud. And generally speaking, a lot of white collar cases or a lot of federal fraud cases involve professionals, professions, investments, some type of business practice. And often that business practice is not going to be familiar to the investigators and prosecutors involved. And so what I have found is often investigators and prosecutors do their best to understand what that practice is, and what they believe to be an intent to defraud can sometimes be explained as a business practice that is maybe uncommon, but certainly not illegal. An example of this is sometimes you see it in healthcare fraud, where there's accusations of billing unnecessary procedures or unnecessary practices and billing that to insurance. So often it can be explained to the investigators and to the prosecutors that a practice is actually medically necessary or is appropriate once they understand how the business is run, how the practice is run, and what the medical necessity is. And through that explanation, something that might otherwise look unnecessary or look fraudulent can then, with the right context, appear as the truth, which is it may not actually be fraudulent or unnecessary. And so often one of the key defenses in defending a fraud case is giving a full explanation of a business practice or a practice that the investigators or government may not be familiar with. And by doing so, negating what they may have perceived as fraud or false statements. There are a wide range of ways this applies. And so anybody being investigated or charged with fraud needs to have an attorney who can get through those materials, understand what that defense is, what that business looks like, and then communicate that effectively to the investigators and prosecutors involved so they understand exactly what was happening and how it wasn't fraud or how there wasn't an intent to defraud. If you find yourself in that situation, please call us. We help people in white collar cases all the time do exactly that. You can reach us at 843-473-7000.